Long ago, on a still and quiet Earth, a humanoid alien, tall and pale, stands above a waterfall while a hovering spacecraft lifts away into the sky. The alien consumes a dark and swirling liquid, triggering its disintegration. As its body tears itself apart and cascades into the water below, its DNA initiates a biogenetic reaction. Many centuries later, archaeologists and partners Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway uncover ancient star maps that appear in the records of several extinct human cultures that were never in contact. They interpret these maps as a summons from what they believe are humanity's creators, known as the engineers. Peter Weyland, the CEO of Weyland Corporation, decides to sponsor a scientific mission based on their findings. He commissions the advanced research vessel Prometheus to carry out that journey. The ship's crew enters cryogenic stasis for the duration of the voyage, while the onboard android David oversees their progress. Upon arrival at their destination, a planet labeled LV-223, the crew are briefed on their objective: to locate the engineers. Mission Director Meredith Vickers, who is also the daughter of Peter Weyland, instructs the team not to engage directly with any intelligent life forms. The Prometheus descends and lands near a massive artificial structure, and a team is dispatched to investigate. Inside the structure, they encounter numerous cylindrical containers, a large statue of a humanoid head, and the corpse of a massive humanoid body, believed to be an engineer. Later, additional corpses are located, and the species is assumed to be extinct. Without the others knowing, David takes one of the containers for private examination, and the rest begin leaking a dark liquid. A powerful storm begins approaching, prompting the crew to return to the Prometheus. However, Milburn and Fifield become disoriented and become stranded inside the structure, where they are forced to spend the night. Aboard the ship, DNA extracted from the dead engineers analyzed and found to be a genetic match to humans. David investigates the container he took and examines the black liquid it contains. He then deliberately infects Holloway with the substance. Holloway later has sex with Shaw, his partner, afterwards which he notices that his eyes are rheumy and becomes alarmed. Looking closer, he sees small, worm-like organisms moving beneath his cornea. Still within the structure, Milburn and Fifield come across two snake-like organisms. One of the creatures kills Milburn. The corrosive fluid released by the organism then burns through Fifield's helmet, exposing him to the dark liquid that had been seeping through the room. The following day, the team re-enters the structure and discovers Milburn's corpse. At the same time, David locates a chamber containing a living engineer in stasis, along with a three-dimensional star map that highlights Earth. Holloway's infection progresses quickly, and he is taken back to the ship. Vickers denies him entry and, at Holloway's request, kills him with a flamethrower. Shortly after, Shaw begins experiencing abdominal pain, and a medical scan reveals that although she is sterile, she has somehow become pregnant. Upon discovering that the fetus is not human, she uses an automated surgical table to remove it. Weak and staggering after the procedure, she stumbles through the ship and discovers that Weyland has secretly been aboard the Prometheus the whole time. Weyland tells her that his goal is to plead with the engineers to help him avoid death from old age. Meanwhile, Fifield, now mutated and monstrous due to the black liquid, returns to the Prometheus's hangar and attacks. He kills several crew members before he is destroyed by fire and crushed by an RT series group transport. Captain Yannick begins to suspect that the structure they have discovered was an engineer military installation, and that they lost control of their own bioweapon, the mutagenic black liquid. Weyland, Shaw, and others return to the structure to awaken the last surviving engineer. David attempts to communicate Weyland's request to it. In response, the engineer decapitates David and kills Weyland and the accompanying team. Shaw escapes, and the engineer activates his spacecraft. David, still functional, contacts Shaw and informs her that the engineer intends to unleash the mutagen on Earth. Shaw convinces Yannick to intercept the ship, and so he flies the Prometheus into its path, sacrificing himself and the remaining crew to stop it. Vickers escapes the ship in an emergency pod, but the wrecked engineer ship falls to the ground and crushes her. Shaw reaches Vickers' lifeboat and finds the alien offspring she removed, now grown into an enormous trilobite, trapped inside the medical bay. David informs her that the engineer survived the crash, and moments later, the engineer breaches the lifeboat's airlock and attacks Shaw. She releases the trilobite and flees. The trilobite subdues the engineer after a violent struggle and implants it. Shaw receives David's remains from the downed engineer vessel, and with his assistance, they activate another spacecraft. They set course for the engineer's home world, determined to uncover the reason behind their attempt to eradicate humanity. Meanwhile, inside the lifeboat left behind, a deacon bursts forth from the engineer's chest. We flash back to the past on Earth, not long after he was brought to life, as David stands inside a beautiful home by a lake. There, he speaks with the man who created him, Peter Weyland. They stand beneath the watchful gaze of Michelangelo's statue of man, pondering the idea of creators and creation. Weyland dreamed of finding humanity's own makers, and David, who would live forever, quietly reminded him that time was not as kind to mortals. Many years passed, and far away in space, a grand ship called the Covenant glided quietly through the stars. It carried over 2,000 sleeping colonists, 1,140 tiny embryos, and a small crew of caretakers, headed for a new home called Origai 6. They dreamed peacefully, watched over by Walter, an android identical in looks to David, but kinder and more obedient. Then something unexpected happened. A burst of cosmic energy, a neutrino wave, struck the ship. Fires sparked, systems failed, and some lives were lost. The crew was awakened too soon, and one of them, Captain Branson, would never make it out of his fiery pod. His wife Daniels mourned quietly and spoke to Walter of the cabin Branson had wanted to build on their new world, and Walter remembered. With Branson gone, his second in command, Chris Oram, took command. As the ship was being repaired, their pilot Tennessee caught a strange signal drifting through space. It was faint, fragmented, but unmistakably human. A song, "Take Me Home, Country Roads." The crew traced the message to a nearby planet, lush, green, and seemingly perfect. Better even than their destination. No one wanted to return to sleep after the disaster. So despite Daniel's concerns, Oram made the call. They would go to this new world instead. 3 stayed in orbit, Tennessee, Ricks, and Upworth, while the others descended in a lander to explore. The planet was breathtaking. Trees swayed in the wind, the air was rich, but there was something off. No animals stirred, no birds sang. As the crew explored, small things began to happen. A crew member named Ledward stepped on a strange pod, releasing tiny particles that drifted silently into his ear. Another, Hallett, breathed in the same dust while exploring a derelict ship, an engineer vessel. Inside, they found a small dog tag that read, Dr. E. Shaw. And then Ledward fell ill, very ill. He was rushed to the lander by Oram's wife Karen, and Maggie, Tennessee's wife, sealed them inside the med bay to quarantine, but it was already too late. From Ledward's back, a pale creature burst forth, a Xenomorph. It attacked and killed Karen. Maggie tried to stop it, but in the chaos, she triggered an explosion that destroyed the entire lander, and she perished in the flames. The creature escaped, and a horrified Daniels watched it unfold. Elsewhere, Hallett collapsed, and from his mouth came a second Xenomorph. The 2 creatures returned, now much larger, and attacked the ground crew. Ancor was killed. Walter was wounded protecting Daniels. And one Xenomorph was brought down, but the other vanished, until a flare lit the sky. A mysterious, hooded figure appeared and beckoned them to follow. With no other options, they obeyed. The figure led them to a city in ruins, towering structures, lifeless streets, and frozen bodies of a once great people, the engineers. Inside the great hall, the stranger removed his hood. It was David. He had survived. He explained that he and Dr. Shaw had arrived here years ago on the very ship the crew found, but something had gone wrong. The ship's dangerous cargo, black liquid that could twist life, had been unleashed. It had wiped out the planet's living things. Shaw, David said, had died in the crash, and he had been alone ever since. They tried to call for help, but ion storms scrambled their signals. While the others searched, David spent time with Walter, his gentler, younger counterpart. But soon, terror would return. The remaining Xenomorph crept into the hall and killed Rosenthal. David found it feeding, and with eerie calm, tried to soothe the creature. When Orem arrived and destroyed it, David grew angry. Orem demanded answers, so David brought him into a secret chamber. There, he showed his work. He had been using the black liquid to create something new, something he called perfect. Before Orem could act, David invited him closer to an egg. It opened, and a face hugger leapt forth. Later, David watched silently as a new life, an alien child, burst from Orem's chest. Walter, searching for his crewmates, found something terrible. Elizabeth Shaw's body, used in David's experiments. When Walter confronted him, David attacked and disabled him. Outside, another crew member, Lope, was attacked by a facehugger, but survived thanks to his friend Cole, who was then killed by a fully grown new creature, a protomorph. Daniels confronted David, realizing the truth. He had killed Shaw. He attacked her, but Walter returned repaired and ready. The two androids fought as Daniels fled to find Lope. They managed to contact the Covenant, and Tennessee returned in a transportation sled, and Daniels, Lope, and Walter boarded the ship. They didn't know they were not alone. A protomorph had followed. As the craft rose high into the skies, the creature attacked. Daniels battled it high above the planet, finally managing to crush it with the sled's crane. Back aboard the Covenant, they began preparations to sleep once more. But something was wrong. Another protomorph had emerged, this one from Lope. It moved fast. It struck in the dark, killing Ricks and Upworth in the shower. With Walter's help, Daniels and Tennessee lured the beast to the ship's bay. They trapped it, vented the chamber, and impaled it on a massive claw. It was gone. Exhausted, Daniels began preparing for sleep once more. She asked Walter one last question about the cabin Branson dreamed of building. But Walter didn't know the reference. He should have. In that moment, Daniels realized the awful truth. It wasn't Walter at all. It was David. She screamed as the pod closed around her, but David calmly sealed her in hypersleep. Alone now, David walked among the sleeping colonists. He quietly regurgitated 2 small embryos, facehugger larvae, and placed them beside the human embryos in storage. Then, recording a message as Walter, he told the ship's log all but 2 crew had died in the accident, and Covenant was still en route to Origai 6. We pan further into the future, elsewhere, in the quiet, unlit reaches of deep space, where a great ship drifted silently on its long journey home. She was called the Nostromo, a commercial freighter hauling 20 million tons of mineral ore and towing a massive refinery. Aboard her were 7 crew members, all in peaceful stasis, their dreams suspended until Earth called them home. But then something stirred. The ship's computer, a system the crew called Mother, had received a signal from a nearby planet. Strange, rhythmic, possibly a distress call. In accordance with standing orders from the company, Mother woke the crew from their long slumber. Groggy but dutiful, they gathered to listen. The orders were clear: investigate. And so they detached the Nostromo from the refinery and made a descent toward the planet's surface. The landing was rough, and the ship suffered damage. While repairs began, Captain Dallas, Executive Officer Kane, and Navigator Lambert donned their suits and headed out to trace the source of the signal. Left behind were Warrant Officer Ripley, Science Officer Ash, and Engineers Parker and Brett, keeping watch and tending to the ship. The team on the planet discovered something extraordinary: a derelict spacecraft, long abandoned. Inside, they found the fossilized remains of a humanoid being. Ribs burst outward, as if something had erupted from within. As they explored, Ripley worked to decipher the strange transmission. And it turns out it wasn't a cry for help after all. It was a warning. Below the decks of the alien ship, Kane found a vast chamber. Countless leathery eggs rested there in silence. But as he studied one, it opened, and something emerged. A creature that leapt and clung to his helmet, pushing past the faceplate with an unnatural strength, and Kane fell unconscious. Dallas and Lambert rushed him back. Ripley, following protocol, denied them entry due to quarantine rules, but Ash overrode her. Inside the medbay, they discovered the creature had attached itself to Kane's face and was feeding him oxygen through a long, tube-like organ down his throat. Attempts to remove it failed. Its blood was acid, eating through the hole. Eventually, however, it released him and then died. The crew, shaken but relieved, resumed their voyage. The ship was repaired, Kane awakened, all seemed well, until one final meal. Around the table they talked and they laughed, and then Kane began coughing. Then he trembled, and from deep within his chest something clawed its way out, a small, shrieking creature, a new life born in blood. It fled into the dark corridors of the ship. Shocked and weaponless, the crew built makeshift tools, motion detectors, flamethrowers, prods, and they began their search for the creature. Brett wandered off looking for the ship's cat, Jones, but in a towering chamber, he met the creature again, now somehow fully grown. It was terrible to behold, and in just a matter of moments, it took him. Later, Dallas entered the air ducts, trying to lure the Xenomorph toward an airlock. But the plan failed. The creature outsmarted Dallas and struck, and then Dallas was gone. Panic settled over the crew. Lambert urged escape in the shuttle, but Ripley, now in command, made a grim revelation. The shuttle could not carry 4. Turning to Mother, Ripley sought answers, then found only betrayal. The signal had been known. Ash, the science officer, was never there for them. He was placed on board to ensure the survival of the alien, even if it meant sacrificing the crew. When Ripley confronted him, Ash attacked, attempting to smother her. But Parker intervened, and in the struggle, Ash's head was knocked loose, revealing wires and circuitry. He was not human. He was an android. Ripley reactivated him briefly. He admitted his mission, speaking of the alien with a kind of admiration. It was pure, he said, a survivor. She cut his power, and Parker burned his remains. Only 3 remained: Ripley, Lambert, and Parker. They set a final plan in motion: destroy the ship and escape. But while gathering supplies, the Xenomorph struck again. This time, Lambert and Parker were taken. Alone now, Ripley armed the Nostromo self-destruct system and fled with Jones. But the path to the shuttle was blocked by the alien itself. She tried to cancel the countdown, but it was too late. With time running out, she fled again. But the creature was seemingly gone. Ripley made it to the shuttle and launched it just as the Nostromo exploded behind her into the stars, and peace seemed to return. So she prepared for stasis. But then, something moved. The Xenomorph was there, hidden within the shuttle, waiting. Ripley, trembling but determined, suited up. She opened the airlock, and space tore through the chamber. The creature was sucked out but held fast. Ripley fired a grappling gun. The creature flew out into space, but the gun caught in the hatch, dragging it back. Clawing at the engines, the Xenomorph tried to re-enter. Ripley acted quickly, firing the engines at full strength, and fire consumed the beast and flung it into the vast void of space. It was over. Ripley cradled Jones and made a final log entry and lay down into her pod. As starlight passed gently over the Nostromo's only survivor, Ripley slept again, adrift but alive, and the long night continued. In the drifting silence of space, long after the screams aboard the Nostromo faded into dust and data, a Weyland Yutani probe glided through wreckage. Among the remains, it found something. A single organic object. The year was 2142. On a distant mining colony called Jackson's Star, a young woman named Rain Carradine worked beneath its dim skies. Orphaned but not alone, her companion was a man named Andy, a synthetic once built for obedience, but now reprogrammed and adopted as her brother. When Weyland Yutani forced an extension of Rain's labor contract, she saw escape only in reckless hope. Her ex-boyfriend, Tyler Harrison, had found a derelict spacecraft rumored to hold cryostasis chambers. Those chambers would make a 9-year journey to the planet Yavaga possible, salvation from the colony. Rain was hesitant, but Tyler and even Andy convinced her. Together, with Tyler's sister Kay, his cousin Bjorn, and Bjorn's girlfriend Navarro, they flew the hauler the Corbalon toward the station in the stars. It was a place split in two, Romulus and Remus, named for the mythic twins of Rome. As they retrieved the stasis pods, something stirred in the dark. Frozen things, facehuggers, awoke. The station locked itself down. In desperation, Rain pulled a chip from a damaged android called Rook and installed it into Andy. The fix worked. Andy could interface with the station, but something deeper changed. The chip rewrote his prime directive: do what's best for Rain. Now, Andy's loyalty belonged not to Rain, but to the company. Navarro was the first to fall. A facehugger clung to her, and as the others scrambled, Bjorn fled with her aboard the Corbalon. Too late, the reactivated Rook warned them. A seed had likely already been planted. As predicted, the chestburster tore free, killing Navarro and causing the Corbalon to crash into the Romulus hangar. The impact left Kay, who stayed behind on the Corbalon, unconscious, and the station itself slipping from orbit. Less than an hour remained now before the station would burn in the rings of the planet below. Kay awoke and found Bjorn, and witnessed the creature that had emerged from Navarro, now transforming into something far worse. Bjorn tried to kill it. Instead, he died as its acidic blood burned through his body. Rain and Tyler continued to navigate the derelict station, slipping past nests of facehuggers. Kay, now alone, was hunted. She tried to reach them, but Andy, his judgment clouded by his rewritten code, refused to unlock the doors that kept them apart, fearing contagion. Rain and Tyler watched helpless as the Xenomorph dragged Kay into the shadows. Andy, ever analytical, uncovered something else. A compound created from the Xenomorphs. A black fluid. A genetic perfection serum. Rook called it the Prometheus strain, and insisted it must be preserved. Rain and Tyler found Kay cocooned and freed her, but in doing so, Tyler was lost, killed by a Xenomorph. Andy too was damaged. In pain and in panic, Kay took the fluid. Rain, now alone, removed the foreign chip from Andy's systems, restoring his mind and his heart. Together, they disabled the ship's gravity. In free fall, they fought the Xenomorphs without risking breach from their corrosive blood. It worked. They escaped aboard the Corbalon just as the Romulus was torn apart by the rings below, taking Rook with it. They had survived, but peace was not theirs yet. He, who was harboring a secret pregnancy, was changed by the serum and gave birth, not to a child, but to something else, something monstrous, a hybrid, its body part human, part Xenomorph, its face that of an engineer. It tore through Kay. It wounded Andy. Rain fought back, forcing the creature into an airlock and ejected it into the swirling rings of Jackson's star. Only Rain and Andy remained. She placed him gently into stasis, recording a final log about their journey to Ivaga. Then, Rain entered a pod herself. Beyond the windows, stars drifted by in silence, and the long road to Ivaga began. Drifting through the cold of space, Ellen Ripley was finally found, still alive. 57 years had passed since the nightmare aboard the Nostromo. Now found and awake, she was haunted by the dreams of the creature that had taken her crew. When brought before a panel of corporate executives, Ripley told them the truth of the Xenomorph, of the deaths, and of the doomed ship. But they didn't believe her. There was no evidence left, they claimed. No wreckage, no creature, just her word. She lost her flight license and learned that LV-426, the place where it all began, now housed a growing terraforming colony. Then one day, Ripley received visitors. Carter Burke, a face from her old employer, Weyland Yutani, arrived with Lieutenant Gorman of the Colonial Marines. Contact with the colony on LV-426 had gone silent. They wanted to investigate, and they wanted her to come. At first, Ripley refused, but Burke made her a promise. They would destroy the Xenomorphs if found, not study them. Reluctantly, Ripley agreed. Aboard the USS Sulaco, she met the crew. Sergeant Apone, Corporal Hicks, Private Vasquez, Hudson, and an android named Bishop. Ripley didn't trust him. Memories of Ash were still too raw. The Colonial Marines, armed and confident, didn't take Ripley's warnings seriously. When they landed on LV-426, they found the colony was broken and quiet. Barricades had been built, but nothing remained. Nothing except 2 living facehuggers in containment and a small, frightened girl hiding in the vents. They called her Newt, and she had survived 3 weeks alone. The Marines traced the other colonists to the atmosphere processing station. There, in the shadows, they found them. A nest. The colonists were cocooned, their bodies used to breed more xenomorphs. And then, the creatures attacked. Apone and Dietrich gone. Ripley, acting fast, drove their APC straight into danger and rescued the survivors. With Gorman unconscious, Hicks took command. He called for the dropship, but something had come on board. A xenomorph killed the pilots, and the craft crashed. The remaining crew fortified the complex and prepared for a siege. That's when Ripley learned the truth. It was Burke. He had sent the colonists to the derelict ship, hoping to profit from the xenomorphs as weapons. He had used her testimony to find them. Ripley promised to expose him, but bigger danger still stirred. The atmosphere processor was failing, and soon it would explode like a small sun. Bishop volunteered to remotely fly in the other dropship using the colony's transmitter. While they waited, Ripley and Newt fell asleep in the medical lab. But when they awoke, the facehuggers were loose. The room was locked. Ripley set off the fire alarm, alerting the Marines, who arrived just in time. Ripley accused Burke. He had tried to have them impregnated, she said, planning to smuggle the embryos through quarantine. The Marines believed her. Before they could act, the lights died. The ceiling burst open and xenomorphs poured in. Hudson, Burke, Gorman, Vasquez were all killed. Hicks was wounded. Newt was taken. Ripley and Hicks reached Bishop in the second dropship, but Ripley refused to leave without Newt. She crafted a weapon, a flamethrower and pulse rifle combined, and ventured alone into the nest. She found the child, but something else waited. The Xenomorph Queen. Vast, surrounded by eggs, Ripley threatened them all with fire. The Queen seemed to understand and held her hive at bay until one egg began to open. Ripley unleashed fury. Flames engulfed the nest. The Queen shrieked and tore herself free to pursue them. Ripley and Newt ran. They reached the dropship and escaped just as the colony was swallowed in nuclear light. Safe aboard the Sulaco, they allowed themselves to breathe, but the Queen wasn't finished. She had hidden in the dropship's landing gear. She tore Bishop in half and turned toward Newt. Ripley climbed into an exosuit cargo loader and faced her in one final battle. They fell into the airlock. Ripley opened it, and the Queen was pulled out into the void, but held on. With one last push, Ripley blasted her into space. The hatch sealed, and peace returned. Ripley, Newt, Hicks, and Bishop entered hypersleep, and the long journey home began. After the harrowing escape from LV-426, the Sulaco drifted quietly through space. Ripley, Newt, Corporal Hicks, and the injured android Bishop lay in cryogenic sleep, unaware that danger still followed them. A sudden fire broke out aboard the ship, triggering the emergency escape pod. The crew was ejected, still asleep, toward an isolated world below. The pod crashed on a remote planet called Fiorina 161. Cold, desolate, and harsh. It was home to a foundry facility and a penal colony. The inmates there were all men, each carrying a rare genetic trait and bound by a strict apocalyptic faith. They found the pod. They found the bodies. And not far from them, something else moved. A facehugger, creeping toward the prison dog, Spike. Ripley later awoke in the care of Clemens, the prison's doctor, and was told the devastating news. She was the only survivor. Suspicious, Ripley asked Clemens to perform an autopsy on Newt. She claimed it was due to a long-extinct disease, hiding her real fear that a xenomorph might be growing inside the girl. Despite protests from the prison authorities, the autopsy was performed. There was no alien. Clemens concluded that Newt had drowned during the crash. As Ripley tried to blend in, her presence made the inmates restless, and the warden, Superintendent Andrews, wary. Meanwhile, a funeral was held. Newt and Hicks were cremated as their bodies were lowered into the furnace. And elsewhere, from Spike, the Xenomorph was born. But this was no ordinary Xenomorph. Born of a dog, it moved on 4 limbs, fast and brutal. It was called the Runner, and it began its deadly work in silence, slipping through corridors and leaving only fear behind. One inmate, Gallic, witnessed it and descended into madness, calling the creature a dragon. Ripley searched for answers. She retrieved the flight recorder from the crash, but needed help to understand it. So she went to the garbage dump, and in there, in the wreckage, found Bishop. He was broken but still conscious. Just as she was leaving, a group of inmates cornered her. But before harm could come, Dylan, a respected inmate leader, intervened. He sent the others away, and Ripley, defiant, left with fire in her eyes. Back in the infirmary, Ripley reactivated Bishop, and he confirmed it, that a xenomorph life form had been aboard the Sulaco. It came with them. Bishop then asked Ripley to disconnect him, knowing he'd never function properly again, and she did so with care. Ripley went to the warden. She warned him of the creature and of what was coming, but he didn't believe her. He thought the deaths were just a sign of unrest. No weapons, no way to fight. Still, a rescue ship had been dispatched for Ripley, and deaths continued to follow. Clemens fell first, then Superintendent Andrews, snatched away before the gathered eyes of the men. Ripley, now certain of the creature's presence and her own connection to it, began to rally the inmates. They came up with a plan. The creature feared fire, so they would drive it from the air ducts using ignited toxic waste. But the runner struck too soon, killing one inmate, causing a fire to erupt early. The plan went wrong. Several died before the old sprinkler system doused the flames. Soon, Ripley began to feel a pain in her chest. Fearing the worst, she used the escape pod's medical scanner, and there it was, a xenomorph queen growing inside of her. She realized why the runner had spared her. She carried its future. And Weyland Yutani wanted her alive. They wanted the queen, not to destroy, but to weaponize. Ripley begged Dylan to kill her. He agreed, but only if she helped them destroy the adult creature first. A final plan was formed. They would lure the runner into the foundry and drop it into molten lead. The prisoners were the bait. One by one they fell, until only Dylan and Morse remained. Dylan broke his promise, staying behind to keep the runner trapped as Morse released the molten metal. The creature, however, did not die. It escaped, covered in searing lead. Ripley turned on the sprinklers. Cold water struck hot metal. The runner cracked and shattered. And then the company arrived. Aaron, the warden's assistant, met them. Among the team was a man who looked exactly like Bishop. He claimed to be the original, a human, not a machine, and asked Ripley to let them remove the embryo. He promised it would be destroyed, but Ripley didn't believe him. As he stepped forward, she backed onto the platform above the furnace. Aaron struck the man with a wrench. The soldiers opened fire, killing Aaron and injuring Morse. The truth was clear. They wanted the Xenomorph Queen. Ripley made her choice. She fell back into the furnace, and as she dropped, the Queen tore free from her chest. With her last breath, Ripley held it close, ensuring that it burned with her. The facility was shut down, and only Morse survived. And in the cold silence that followed, Ripley's final message, recorded long ago aboard the Nostromo, played once more. The nightmare was over, for now. 2 centuries had passed since Ellen Ripley's final sacrifice on Fury 161. Yet, far across the galaxy, on a deep space research vessel named Auriga, her story was not over. Using preserved blood samples from before her death, military scientists succeeded in cloning Ripley. Their aim was not resurrection, but extraction. For within her had grown a Xenomorph Queen, and they had brought it back with her. The embryo was removed, the Queen raised to maturity, her eggs harvested for study. And Ripley, this new Ripley, clone number 8, was kept alive. She was different. The blending of human and xenomorph had altered her. She was stronger, faster, her blood acidic. She remembered things that should have died with the original Ripley. She could feel the xenomorphs, even sense them. Soon after, a rough crew of mercenaries arrived aboard the Auriga, piloting a battered ship called the Betty. They came with a shipment, kidnapped civilians delivered in cryostasis. The scientists used these unfortunate souls as hosts, breeding several xenomorphs in secret. Among the mercenaries were Elgin, Johnner, Christie, Breeze, Hillard, and the youngest, Call. When they met Ripley 8, Call recognized her name and what she once did. Fearing the nightmare would repeat, Call tried to kill her, but it was too late. The xenomorphs had escaped their cages and were already loose. Chaos followed. Many aboard the Auriga were killed. General Perez, Elgin, even the scientist Dr. Getterman, who was dragged away. The others fled, but the ship itself had a deadly failsafe. In the event of catastrophe, it would automatically return to Earth. Ripley 8, the surviving mercenaries, and a soldier named Di Stefano, and a terrified man named Purvis banded together. They had to destroy the ship and survive. As they made their way through the damaged vessel, Ripley stumbled into a dark, secret chamber. There, in tanks and tubes, floated twisted remains, failed Ripley clones. 7 distorted mixtures of Ripley and Alien. One was still alive, barely, and begged her to end its suffering. With fire and fury, she granted it its wish, destroying the others as well. Further into the ship, the group swam through a submerged kitchen, only to be hunted by xenomorphs. One was slain, but Hillard was taken. As they continued to climb to safety, another attacked, blinding Christie. He sacrificed himself so that the others could continue. Then, betrayal. Wren, one of the scientists, shot Call, but she rose again, alive and whole. She wasn't human, not exactly. Call was an auton, a machine built by other machines, from a forbidden line of synthetic life once hunted into extinction. Using her unique abilities, she linked with the ship's systems and changed its course, straight into Earth's atmosphere, hoping the fiery crash would destroy every last alien. She also sealed Wren's escape route, ensuring the creatures would find him. But Ripley 8 was taken. The xenomorphs brought her to their queen. There, cocooned nearby, was Gediman, still alive. And from the queen's body, Ripley witnessed something terrible. The queen had changed. She no longer needed eggs or hosts. Human DNA had given her a womb, and she birthed a hybrid. It was monstrous, pale, powerful, and strangely human. It looked to Ripley not with hunger, but love. It saw her as its mother. But Ripley could not stay. As the creature turned on Gediman and killed him, she fled. Wren, once again trying to escape aboard the Betty, found himself confronted by Purvis. As a chest burster emerged from Purvis's chest, it burst through Wren as well, killing them both. The others fought off the young alien, and just as the ship launched, Ripley returned. She wasn't alone. The newborn had followed her. It crept aboard the Betty, killed De Stefano, and nearly destroyed Call. Ripley intervened. The creature paused, drawn to her. She comforted it gently, whispering like a mother. But there was only one way to stop it. Quietly, Ripley sliced her palm on the creature's fanged mouth. Her acidic blood began to burn through a nearby viewing window. A tiny hole formed. She nudged the newborn forward, and the vacuum of space took hold. With a terrible roar, the creature was sucked into space, its body torn apart, leaving Ripley to watch, heartbroken but resolute. Behind them, the Auriga fell into the atmosphere and exploded, destroying the xenomorphs on board once and for all. As the Betty descended to Earth, Call asked Ripley 8 what she would do now in a world she hadn't seen in over 200 years. Ripley looked out to the blue planet, so familiar yet foreign, and whispered, "I'm a stranger here myself."